Oh, this thing, the thing that everyone's been talking about for a while, this Sennheiser IE200. In some ways, it's just as bad as some of the reviewers have said. In some ways, it's actually even worse. But in some ways, it's way better. It's really good in some ways. And what can I say? It's all of those three things all at once. Let me show you. What do you get in the box? Well, you get the IEMs, you get the wire, and you get this nice little carrying pouch. That's all vintage, just like your granddad would have had. This is actually quite nice. You also get silicone tips and foam tips. More on that in a bit as well. Now, the first thing you notice is the IEM, but the other thing you notice is the wire. To say that this is some of the cheapest wire that I've seen in an IEM for a while is an accurate statement. I'm not understating it, I'm not overstating it. This is cheap and thin, really, really thin. You know that bit where the headphone cable splits into two and then you have a little module there to, lengthen it? Well, in this case, it is a literal piece of plastic tubing. The audacity to say that this is enough for your money, and the other bit over here, that's heat-treated plastic. Like, they've just something that someone could probably do at home. And you know what? The thing about having really thin cables is microphonics, which is basically if you've got thin cables and they keep moving about, which they will if you walk around with them, those vibrations get transferred into the IEM and into your head. So you can actually hear the vibrations. It's a really annoying thing that does happen. One way to mitigate that is use better quality cables, thicker cables. They know what they're doing. They went for the cheap cables knowing exactly what the effect would be, and still they went for it. Now, the microphonics are kept in check partly because of that little plastic tubing. Don't get me started on that again. That'll break apart soon, so that's gone. But it also has this memory wire thing, which will, sort of mold around your ear, and that does reduce microphonics a fair bit, but it doesn't eliminate it though. Now, the wire uses an MMCX termination, which is again fine. I'm absolutely fine with that as long as it works, but it has been literally 1 day since I had this, 1 day. And already when I move it around a little, like if it's over my ear and I just shift the wire around a bit, audio already starts to cut in and out a bit, which tells me that maybe the manufacturing tolerances for that MMCX termination is not on point. And that's just, look, at this point, here's what I want you to do. Watch other reviewers, and if they speak about the same issue that I have, then you don't have to watch any of this anymore. You don't have to watch any review anymore. That is a massive red flag. Just don't buy this. You should not have to tolerate anything like that, because even $20 IEMs don't have that issue anymore. But let's just say that this is just my unit that has come. It's not a review unit. I bought it with my own money. Let's just say it's my unit that has a defect. It happens. So we move on. The next thing you notice is the IEM itself. Now, it's a nice looking IEM. It looks pretty much the same as the other Sennheiser IEMs. It's very lightweight and it's very small. That is a very good thing. In a sea of all sorts of chi-fi IEMs which are massive in the ear, this is something that I can confidently recommend to someone with small ears as well, which is not something I can say very often. And you know what's better? The nozzle. I go on about nozzle width quite a bit because it's really important for comfort, and this is narrow enough that it will again fit smaller ears. That combined with the lightweight means it's really comfortable. So from an ergonomics point of view, chi-fi, if you're watching, you should learn a thing or two from these guys. Now, it does come with silicone tips as well as foam tips, and Sennheiser says that they've got this 2-notch system. There are 2 positions where you can keep your ear tips. So there's position 1 where it just sort of goes on, you can hear a click, and then position 2 is when you push further in and it clicks in all the way. That's all very good. It's all very good on paper, but in practice, position 1 is not a thing, because it takes so little force to drive the ear tip into the second position, the fully locked one, that every time you put it in your ear, it's going to go into position 2 anyway. So unless you're prepared to very carefully put it in your ear every single time, you're never going to use it in position 1. And that's just as well, because the frequency response is pretty poor. It's basically got this controlled bass leak, but it's a lot of bass leak. Sub bass is all but gone. Mid bass is there, but it's really, you can call it neutral if you want, but I would call it maybe even a little bit shy of neutral. What you have is basically a bass leak and a treble emphasis because of the relative amounts of bass and treble now. And if you like that sort of thing, sure, you can go ahead and try and use it with the first notch, but more than likely you'll just absentmindedly put it in your ear once and the ear tip will just be forced into notch 2. Now, the silicone ear tips are a little bit difficult for me to measure with because they're so thin and flimsy that every time I want to put it in the measuring mic, it sort of folds in itself. But that's more my problem, that's not yours. What that means for you is that it'll be very, very comfortable. It's really thin, very comfortable, and if you use the biggest silicone ear tips, You will get less bass and sub bass, but it'll still be there, but you'll get that great comfort. However, because the nozzles are this narrow, I recommend you just use the foam tips. Foam tips on this are not going to be as uncomfortable as foam tips on most Sci-Fi IEMs, just because of that nozzle width. And that's a good thing, because using foam tips will also isolate a lot of sound, which means you'll hear more of your music. It's like getting free resolution, right? And these foam tips are quite nice. I have no problem with them. However, if you want silicone tips and you don't want to lose that bass, I find third-party tips to work pretty well. I am currently using these hybrid silicone foam tips from Tin Hi-Fi. Those work, so you could shop around for some third-party tips or just use the foam like I am. It's pretty good. So how does it sound? I think it sounds pretty good for the most part. When it comes to bass and sub bass, you get that nice dynamic driver mid-bass thump. Really nice, bit of distortion, nice warm bass, and you also get a fair bit of sub bass extension. But it's not just that. The bass has quality, has clarity, has good amount of resolution. The whole thing's very linear. It sounds really good. The bass doesn't bleed into the mids too much, just a little bit of warmth. The true beauty of this IEM though comes in the upper mids. See, what happens with some other IEMs is they'll have a peak, a pinna gain peak of about 3 kilohertz, and they'll have a little scoop out in the 1.5 kilohertz region, and that leads to a thinner, sharper sound. And okay, this is getting really technical, I get it. If you're not an audiophile, you're not following this, it's very simple. Earphones in your monitors basically represent mid-range, which is your vocals, pianos, all of that in different ways. Some of them prefer a sharper edge to the tone, and some of them prefer a softer edge to the tone, and it's really up to you what you like. This one threads the needle beautifully, like I've seen very few IEMs do, and therefore all your vocals sound really nice, really intimate. It sounds really beautiful, along with the strike of chords on a piano or a guitar. All of them sound really nice, but they still have that little bit of a sharp edge to it, just to give it a little bit extra sparkle. It's genuinely very nice. And the entire frequency spectrum itself, it's nice and smooth, the frequency response. I really do enjoy listening to this IEM. The problem lies in the upper treble. Now, I can't believe I'm going to do this. I mean, what I'm about to say is going to shock you. Look, if you're going to be done with the video, if it's going to shock you that much, just hit that subscribe button before you go. That's all I'm going to say, because I'm about to drop a truth bomb here. Are you ready for this? Okay. Believe it or not, I'm not 21. Yeah, I know. It's a shocker. I'm actually older than that. Now, one of the things that happens when you get older, beyond about 14-15 kilohertz, in the really high treble region, you start to hear less. It's not that you go deaf, it's not that you can't hear it at all. It just sounds a lot lower in volume than you would have in your, say, early 20s. So believe me, when my old ass tells you that there is a astonishing level of energy around the 15-16 kilohertz mark, like there's way too much, there's a little treble spike. If you're younger than me, you're going to hear it. More than likely, you're going to hear it a lot more than me, and it is going to be troublesome. Maybe some people like that, but more often than not, you're going to have to EQ this down. Now, you might say, no, but this is to give it air and sparkle. No. All it does is make the treble seem cheap. And all you have to do is reduce everything around 14, 15, 16 kilohertz by about 4 to 6 dB. That's all you need to do, and it sorts it right out. After that, it sounds beautiful. But what if you don't want to EQ it, or you don't know how to EQ it, or you're using an iOS device and you don't have access to any EQ tools? What then? That is alienating a lot of their customer base, just like that. And if you're thinking that airiness gives it staging and imaging, it does not. In terms of staging, the IE200 is mediocre at best. In terms of imaging, again, if I'm being charitable, I would say it's mediocre, but sometimes it's just not that great. And that's okay. I am still saying it sounds beautiful otherwise. If you push that treble down, it sounds gorgeous enough that I don't care about the imaging and staging. It's just not that great. So do you see my problem here? Every time I want to say something good, and there are good things, there's a host of bad things that more than balance it out. I want to talk about the ergonomics. I love the ergonomics. It's lightweight, it's small, it's friendly to various shapes and sizes of ears and ear canals. That is something the entire IEM industry needs. but you've got, in my case at least, the MMCX connector that seems to have a little bit of a loose connection problem every now and then. You've got a really cheap cable that introduces a lot of microphonics. You've got plastic tubing. I just can't get over that. And if I want to talk about the frequency response and the sound quality, I want to say great things, but then the imaging and soundstage are really not fantastic. They're not terrible, they're just not fantastic. And there's that big treble spike, which is easy enough for someone with a little bit of EQ knowledge, but for so many people is going to make this fatiguing to listen to. And finally, the price. $149, $150 for this. It's almost as if Sennheiser is saying, you give us that much money and this is all we can give you. Here you go with your little plastic tubing and your little cheap wire. This is what you deserve. Now, in reality, it's probably nothing like that. It's just an accounting decision. It could also be that Sennheiser is a little bit out of touch with the market because the Chi-Fi market has completely changed the paradigm. Okay, here's an exercise, right? Let's say the IE200 was half its price. Instead of $150, it's $75, right? At $75, well, the first thing that comes to mind is the Truth-Ear Hexa at roughly $80. And the Truth-Ear Hexa, I kid you not, will equal or better the resolution of the IE200 and will run circles around it in terms of staging and imaging. Especially imaging. Now, this has a couple of tricks up its sleeve. The mid-bass thump on the IE200 is far more satisfying than it is on the Hexa, and you have that really nice upper mid-range, which I think the IE200 does so well. But my point is, the Truth-Ear Hexa will give you equal to a better build quality, definitely a better wire, and even if the IE200 does a couple of things better than the Hexa, you've got to understand the Hexa is half its price. And you know what the best part is? It doesn't matter because the IE200 will still sell. Here's why. The average person across the world does not buy Chi-Fi IEMs. Maybe it's because of a preconceived notion, maybe it's because they're just not aware of the options out there, which is another reason you should subscribe and spread the word. Tell people about the channel. Thank you. Either ways, when they go past to Sennheiser IEM, they'll say, oh, Sennheiser, that's that brand that does good audio. How much is that thing? They'll say $149, which will be significantly cheaper than the $500 things he's used to seeing in that same window. And he'll probably pick it up. And you know what? He'll have a pretty good experience because it's going to be better than all the other crap that he's probably heard so far. It's going to be far more comfortable in the ear than you'd imagine, and it's going to sound pretty good, which is why I don't know if Sennheiser is actually going to fix anything. But you've come here to see this review from a person who does this sort of thing, and there's no way I can recommend this in good conscience at this price. Although if it is at a steep discount and if you don't mind EQing it, I absolutely love this IEM. Genuinely I do. But there you have it. Sennheiser IE200. Do you think it's a conundrum? Do you think Sennheiser is just being arrogant, or they're just playing their cards smartly and seeing if it sticks? Only time and the comments section perhaps will tell. I'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste.